Just never pay attention to it.
Is there a mobile version of Gwent?
Probably will be.
I didn't
I
know.
feel like I need to know what that is.
The Witcher 3.
I have no idea what Gwent is.
Oh, okay.
It was a card game.
I'm more concerned that this is the second day in a row that we've done a podcast, or second podcast in a row, where Brad has had some strange drink that's been described as milky.
Yeah,
and this is
beer is
becoming
not
a problem.
It's not
fresh.
the first time then.
It's not the
Well,
first
no,
time.
I was just drinking coconut water during Close to the Metal, but everyone was like, "What is he drinking?" And I said, "Oh, it's just watered down milk because milk is it's a little strong for me."
Do people believe you?
All right, we're going to have to explain that here in a minute. Hello, everyone. This is Trends with Benefits, our weekly roundtable podcast where we gather our experts here at DT and talk about the topics of the day. And this week, I mean, it really boils down to two things: Apple's event and then Microsoft's event. So what we're going to do is go through everything that the two companies announced, go through it kind of piece by piece, talk about our opinions on it. We want to get your opinions. So if you're watching on YouTube right now when we're live streaming, we want to hear what you have to say, what your thoughts are. If you're a fan of Apple, if you think, if you're not a fan, whatever it is, whatever your comments as we go through these things. So go ahead and pop those in there, and we'll get to those and your questions. I'm your host, Greg Nibbler. So why don't we go ahead and talk to our roundtable here now. I think most of you probably know Brad at this point, but Brad, please explain why we described your drink as milky.
Well, it's a fresh hop beer that is not so fresh anymore, so it's lost a lot of its flavor, and what you're kind of left with is a malt base and then like funky hops, and so it's sort of oniony, like garlicky.
That is
not exactly what I was hoping for.
Worst
from a refreshing
description
beer, yeah.
ever. So just as you watch the show, know that is what Brad is tasting.
It tastes
as
like a
he's answering
pizza.
these questions.
Trying to keep humble,
That's so
I'm still
gross.
sipping it, so it can't be that bad.
It's not too bad.
All right, and on down the line.
My name is Brandon. I write for the SEO department of Digital Trends and the editorial strategy department.
Excellent. And on the end, we have a first-time podcaster joining us today.
Hello, I am Matt Leong. I am a web developer here at Digital Trends.
Nice. Well, you haven't screwed up so far yet. So
Not yet.
We're 30
Not
seconds
yet.
in.
I'm like right there.
It's really close.
Yeah, it's like right there.
There'll be a
I can
buzzer
feel
that
it.
goes off
I can
once that
feel it.
happens. Yeah, it's going to be close.
I'm waiting for that red light to blink.
And somebody will just escort you out of here. That'll be it. All right, well, let's get into this. I know everybody's excited to talk about what's going on. So, again, we're going to go through Apple's event first, and then we'll get to Microsoft's event after that. So we'll do it kind of one by one. Get your questions, get your comments in there. But let's talk about Apple's Hello Again event that they had. I still don't really like that name, but nonetheless, that's what they came up with. So we were expecting some things to be coming out. We expected a new MacBook, which is what we got. And I think maybe let's talk about them. Maybe we'll talk about the OLED Touchbar first. Like, talk about this thing that they've come up with, which, if you haven't heard about it, and they're getting rid of basically the F keys that are at the top or whatever it would be, and they have an OLED strip that is going to be customizable to whatever you want. So it'll be customizable to the apps, customizable to whatever you're using, gives you shortcut keys, and it can be designed for whatever you want. Now, to me, I mean, I guess I'll just say my opinion, and then we'll pass it on around here, is I don't know if this is really something that exciting to me. I mean, I can already do that on the computer. I mean, I guess it's neat. It's kind of a cool little flashy thing to have on there. But the functionality of it, I don't think that's a really big draw for me personally. But Brad, I want to hear what you think about this.
I mean, I think they compared it to putting a touchpad on a computer or running all flash storage. And those are huge advancements, not just in mobile computing, but in computing. And this feels more like the feature that nobody was asking for.
Yeah.
It sort of feels a lot like it's obviously not as detrimental to the experience as far as we know as removing a headphone jack from a phone. But it's sort of this thing where Apple is acting like, oh my God, you guys really wanted this. You wanted no function keys.
Clamoring for it.
You've been asking for it, and it's like nobody's been complaining about function keys.
It seems like innovation for the sake of so-called innovation.
I think it's more like iteration. I hate to. We had a conversation about this the other day, and Steve Jobs used to drive Apple, and he was kind of a jerk, and people kind of said he was because he would point at something and say, "Let's do that." And people would say, it's not possible. And he's like, you do it, or I'll find someone who will. Mm-hmm. And that's how he operated. And that's why they were able to really innovate and bring new products to the market with new features that people wanted. Mm-hmm. And now it seems like they're just iterating on what they've got. And this is just another example of we've got these touch features already built for our iPhones. Might as well throw them on here.
It feels novel, but I think you're right in saying that it's not as divisive as taking the headphone jack off the iPhone 7. People aren't going to not buy it because of that. Whereas with the iPhone 7, there's going to be people who are completely turned off by it. But with this, it's kind of just an added perk. Whether or not that it's a beneficial one remains to be seen, I think.
Totally. And they were talking about how there's no like you don't use function keys anymore. Like you use this old terminal. We don't do that anymore. And then 2 minutes later, like, but they're still there. Don't worry about it. I was like, okay, so it's not that special. Like,
I'm curious from like a development side. Like, is this something that you would utilize, or do you see this as an advantage, or is it just a kind of a I don't know, is it even useful to you?
Maybe not for me personally. I really like, having like my 2 monitors and like a really nice. I'm a mechanical keyboard guy, and so like having that LED touch bar for me with my laptop over here almost does nothing for me. And, my perspective right now, it's not going to do a lot for me.
Yeah, it's not really going to influence you to go buy this or help you with work or help you with developing.
It's definitely like fancy and shiny and cool, but
it's neat. But it's not a game changer by any means.
It's neat. That's a great way to
right.
put it.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I'm looking at it too. It's definitely not something that you were talking about with Steve Jobs, because Apple was always that company that came up with the product you didn't know you needed and something flashing wow. And this is just, I don't think this is really going to do it for a lot of people. It sounds like we're all kind of in agreement on that. And looking at what some of the comments are coming through. See, Patrick says it's not good to have because some things need the F keys. I think you can probably still program.
You can. There's like a hotkey. It looked like where you could sort of re-enable.
You can turn them on.
F keys as your touch.
Again,
section.
they're the digital F keys, but they're there.
Right.
Yeah, but it's
and if you buy the 13-inch, you get the choice of having either the non-touch version or the touch version.
So really, it's not even.
They really didn't even like go full force in this and say like nobody needs these anymore. They were like, well, nobody needs them, but I mean, like some people might still want them, so you can still buy the one with them if you want it.
They also incorporated the fingerprint scanner, right?
Yeah, the fingerprint scanner
the touch bar.
Neat.
That's a useful.
It's probably the most useful
Right.
feature out of it, I think.
But again, like other people have been putting biometric entry methods on laptops for years.
Long time.
This is something that Apple is now catching up to. They're not leading the charge here. They're not the first company to do this. And also, I want to point out that they said that they're the first company to put Retina displays in a laptop, and that's technically true because
they're the only ones who manufacture Retina displays.
It's like,
I noticed
of
that
course,
too.
yeah. So it's not like they had the highest resolution screen in a laptop ever or anything like that. They just put their branded thing in there, and then so we put the first operation of our brand.
They were also the first company to put out an iPhone.
Right.
That is
Same idea.
That is not wrong.
Yeah.
That is absolutely
That is
true.
not
Applaud them
wrong.
on that.
Well, now you have your emojis at your fingertips, so that's really the biggest innovation I can see from that. But like I said, curious what people think. It looks like so far from the comments that we're getting right here, it's people are kind of in agreement with all this.
And part of it too, I think, is that the MacBook Pro is a computer for the most devout Apple fans. That this is a computer that people who really like having an Apple computer will pay extra for this system. And those are enthusiast users. Those are, people like they bring up this use case of like the DJ. And that's how kind of what I always think of when people are like, oh, I'm going to buy a MacBook Pro. Like, oh, you a DJ? Like that's who's using.
Wow.
That's who I feel like is using
Just
these computers.
judging
Or in
people.
college. No, I'm
DJs?
not judging.
European DJs?
No, but I'm just saying that it is a choice of creative professionals who are often on their own and often traveling, and it does seem to be a good fit for them.
Yeah.
Those people don't want touch rows. I'll tell you right now, they want hotkeys because they're not sitting there looking at their computer. And it's a conversation that happens with gaming keyboards, like you said, mechanical keyboards. You got pretty lights all over them, and people are like, oh, well, the keys you can use are highlighted. It's like, I'm not looking there. I'm looking up here.
Yeah.
And I might see it in my periphery, but like on a laptop, I think that's even less likely.
I think the people that are really excited about this, or will be, are only the people that have already bought into the ecosystem.
Yeah, but I'm saying that like I think the MacBook Pro is the wrong target. I think instead you put this on the MacBook for people who aren't really that familiar with their computer, are trying to figure out how to use their function keys, and when they open up Pages, because only people who have a MacBook and don't really know how to use their computer would use Pages. Sorry if anyone uses Pages, but like it's not a good application.
Brad is just judging left and
I'm
right.
just
by the
judging.
way.
I'm throwing
If
shade
you have a
everywhere.
MacBook, he just thinks you're some
But I think
crappy
that's
DJ.
the kind of user
and-
who would want to look down at those function keys and see like, oh, here's where I change my font. Super easy. I want to make something bold right there. Whereas the people who are buying MacBook Pros who are spending $2,000, $3,000 on a laptop,
Yeah, we haven't
they
got to
know
the
what they're
price.
getting. They know exactly what they want. Like they know where those keys are. When they're using Photoshop, they know what their hotkeys do.
Well, let's talk about the new MacBook. Obviously, we've got the OLED Touch Bar, which is the addition, but it's bringing the MacBook back, giving it an update. But is the update enough, for the hardware itself, for the computing itself? Is this an improvement over what we've had before?
No.
No.
Yeah, there's the answer
Here's,
right there.
here's the problem: is
See.
that Apple was so far behind in terms of processor curve that they were using fourth and fifth generation processors that are years old, and they kept pushing back and not updating these systems. And even when they were given the chance to update to the newest system, they didn't do it. They still chose the last year's processors instead of this year's processors. Well, everyone else is switching.
It's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, why would you do that?
It's bizarre.
Why would you come out of the gates with a product that uses last-gen specs right from the get-go?
But to be fair, not to get too ahead of ourselves, Microsoft did the same thing.
With
The
the
Surface
Surface,
Studio.
Well, and not understanding why they did it. I mean, is it just because, like you said, this is for the hardcore Apple fans, so they're going to buy it anyway? So why not just go with what you've got?
Yeah,
Or-
but the new chips provide. We've seen about a 10 to 15% increase in performance. We've seen they have much better battery life when playing back high resolution content above 1080p. There's no reason you wouldn't use them. They're the same price, especially to for a company like Apple.
You
They
buy 'em
pay what they
wholesale.
want. Yeah.
Let's see. Jim in the chat here says only dual core for the 13-inch MacBook. Why not quad core? Yeah, that's another good question.
Because like the thing about this is the computers are a lot more expensive than they were. These MacBook Pros are on the order of $300 or so higher than they did cost before. And now
And it's not
they
top of the
need to
line.
offer something that is a more competitive price point because there's no MacBook Air. Well, there
No, they
still
kept
is a
they
MacBook
kept the Air.
They
which
didn't
was-
get
I
rid of
don't know
it,
why they
but
kept
it's
the
still
Air.
not updated. They didn't update the MacBooks either. It's just the MacBook Pro. It's kind of a misstep here. Like it wasn't what we were hoping for.
Yeah. Brendan, do you have another thought on that? Is that what you were? Okay. All right.
was
So
gonna agree.
MacBook Air. So there we go. So far, not so looking so great, not so innovative for Mac. It kind of seems like that's what people are thinking too. So go ahead and, like I said, keep putting your comments in there, your questions. We'll get to those as we go. So going along to something else, they did have a couple of other announcements. The TV app seemed to be a really big push if you watch their press conference, and it's essentially. That's the name of the app, TV, which I guess that's good branding. But all it does is it brings your content together. So it's a content curation app. So you can watch your programs across platforms, across different devices, which again does not seem very innovative when it comes down to it. And on top of that, it doesn't work with Netflix. Netflix is not part of that. So the way they were saying it is you could watch an NFL game and then switch to your HBO and have it all right there, and it organizes everything that you're watching, which is taking other people's content. It's almost like Apple's just given up on the whole idea of being an innovator there and saying like, well, all these other people did cool things, so we'll organize it for you and make it easier for you to use. And that's essentially what it seemed to be to me.
And they're not innovating here either. This is something that not only was sort of a limited feature at previous Apple TV OS, I believe, but has also been something with Roku, where you can enter all your data, you have all your accounts hooked up, and you just say, I want to watch Trailer Park Boys. And it goes like, well, here's
Good
where
choice.
you can watch it. And that's, it's a simple way to work, but it's this thing where Apple's like, look at this cool thing we did, but somebody else already did it. Like, you're just following again, you know?
I have no problem with it though.
No.
Like it's
a good
a good thing to have. It's a universal menu. I can't tell you how many times I just jump out of an app to enter another app. I mean, it's not a big problem. It's not a big issue. But I have thought, well, what if there's one thing that consolidated all of these offerings into one? And
Except for Netflix, yeah.
except for Netflix, which is a
Which is
huge
interesting.
omission. And
Yeah, so instead, all those shows that you pay for on a monthly basis already, instead you're going to have to buy them from Apple again if you want to watch them.
Yep.
So.
Now, did they purposely leave out Netflix? I don't know the story behind that.
I don't know if they've actually released a whole lot of the story. I would imagine there's some kind of a money deal is what it came down to. Netflix probably wanted more than Apple was willing to pay, and that's just how it ended up. So we'll see. I mean, definitely some serious thoughts in there that I won't repeat
about any
but you can go there and read that. Somebody does not like Apple in the chat. All right, so there's kind of summing up some of the things that they had. So, we talked about the OLED Touchbar, return of the MacBook, and the TV app. Anything else that you guys think about that you could take away from the Apple event that you were excited about? Did anything excite you during this thing? I feel like this is
Anything
a
else?
struggle to find something.
Thunderbolt 3, I'm glad to see that there's continued to be improved support for that standard. We talked about that on Close to Metal last week. People today were telling me like, well, it has no USB ports. I was like, it has 4 USB ports. They're like, but I need an adapter for everything. Like, well, in a year and a half, you won't. And if you're going to spend $2,000 on a computer, you want it to last a few years. The next external hard drive that you buy will probably be USB Type-C. Eventually, you're going to be buying keyboards and mice and monitors. They showed off that LG monitor, which surprisingly enough is
pretty cool.
very competitively priced. It's about a $1,200, $1,300 5K monitor. The only other 5K monitor you can buy is over $2,000.
So that's good.
And they have a 4K version too for $700, which is also quite cheap.
But not Apple's.
No, they're both made by LG,
Yeah.
and that was something that people were they really wanted those big 32, 35-inch cinema displays, but Apple hasn't made those in 2 years. And I don't know if they will again, unless there's some rumors that they're going to try and make their own OLED display, standalone display, or perhaps an iMac panel.
I could see that maybe with the Touch Bar being the stepping stone to getting something like that.
Maybe.
But even still, that's I don't know. We'll see what comes out from there with that. But yeah, definitely let us know your thoughts. So I guess that kind of wraps up what we're talking about with the Apple event. Move on to Microsoft. So Microsoft had their event just the day before that, and this definitely came out with a lot of really innovative ideas and innovative concepts of where they're going. But the one really big thing they had was when it comes to computing, was the new Surface Studio with that Surface style thing. That's the one I wanted to talk about, which is really an incredible looking computer. If you go to our website, digitaltrends.com, Jeremy Kaplan did kind of an hands-on review of it. And it's a really interesting way to combine a touch screen and this giant, amazing computer with a new way to interact with it. And I was curious what you guys thought about this. With the Surface Dial is one of the things that they have with this, where it's a new, it's kind of like a circular little stamp, almost is what it looks like. And you can use it and drag it on the screen, switch it so it's flat, or use it off the screen. It's kind of a unique way to interact. I doubt there's a lot of things that will work with it quite yet until developers get their hands on it. But what are your thoughts on this, on the Surface Studio? Do you think this is a good innovation for them, or is it just kind of more of the same?
I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
For such a large display.
28 inches.
28
28
inches, like 3:2 ratio.
4,500 by 3,000, so over 4K.
That's a giant screen.
Yeah.
And I'm a sucker for screen real estate.
Okay, so screen was definitely something for you.
I gotta say, I don't get the dial.
Okay, so
I
it's
don't
not
get
working
it.
for you.
Yeah.
And since you are on the development side of things, so you don't think this would be an advantage? in
Not
any
for
way?
me. I can see someone. I mean, obviously, like probably what you're saying now is like a designer or someone using it. I can see that easily, and I dabble in that a little bit. But as far as someone like me who's just coding, just working with browsers and code and whatever,
Not something that's really.
I don't know. I don't know what it would be so useful for me for.
But
Yeah.
you probably you wouldn't use a touch screen on its own that much either.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't, and it's interesting that Microsoft keeps pushing it because we're starting to have to support more touch devices,
Yeah.
and it's interesting.
I mean, and that does seem to be the way things are going. We've got a couple of comments here in the chat with like a Surface Studio in the $1,900 price range. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be coming down from where it's at right now.
$3,000,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah,
$3,000.
$3,000.
Insane.
The thing about this thing is that it's cool, but most people aren't going to buy one. This
Yeah.
is not a product that's targeted at most users. This is the kind of thing that's going to replace a storyboard artist computer or a drafting
drafting table.
table.
It's professional
It's-
equipment.
Yeah, this is something that you're going to be using this to make money for yourself.
Totally.
Well, do you think this is something though that eventually they will be scaling down into a more general consumer product, or is this it? You think it's just going to be at that high end?
Some of this tech, maybe. I mean, you might see like a mini dial for the Surface Pro 4 and Surface Book. That'd be kind of interesting. And they already said that the dial input method is going to become an open standard, so
Yeah,
that
'cause they
other
want more
hardware
people-
manufacturers will be able to create their own dials and things that
Which is
utilize
smart.
that.
Yeah, absolutely, to be doing that.
We also didn't really, one of the big other things about it is the hinge, which we didn't talk about at all, which kind of, that again appeals to the creative types, people who are drafting, people who are artists who can rest their hand and they have that technology, the palm sensitive one, so it doesn't register your palm essentially when you place it on it. So I think that's really neat, but again, I don't think that's gonna making that and putting that on a smaller machine. I don't think that's necessarily gonna do anything for the general public.
Okay. Yeah, so it's just one of those things that's really cool to see. But in the end, most consumers aren't ever going to.
Another neat thing.
Yeah, it's a neat thing.
It's very
Okay.
niche.
All right.
But
So
actually,
that's-
it did make us say, hey, this is neat,
it
as
is.
opposed to the OLED Touch Bar, which is do people, I'm very
Right.
skeptical of that. I want to, I want to spend time with it. I want to use it and see, like, is this something that's useful?
For the OLED Touch Bar, yeah.
Also, like, not to go back to that too far, but, like, what happens when you boot camp your system and you have an OLED Touch Bar?
Probably
nothing.
Probably
Yeah,
nothing.
Do you
probably
just
Literally
use your
nothing.
F keys? Like, is it just a blank strip at the
It's
top of
like a
your
blank.
computer,
Does
and
anyone
now
care
you can't
if you lose F keys?
do... Well, but I'm just saying, you lose... Not only do you lose your F keys, there's no physical power button.
Yeah.
There's no physical escape button. And without those things, it's really hard to use your computer. So if your touch bar breaks, you're kind of SOL.
Yeah, that's
unless
true.
you, like, pop the battery out of your laptop and start over, you know?
Right. Wow. Well, yeah, that's a good point. We'll see what happens with that. But
Was there any rumors of the Surface Studio going into it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they were. They released peripherals,
Okay.
and everyone kind of saw the peripherals ahead of time and said, like, "Oh, there's an all-in-one coming."
it seems like some people are definitely liking the stand. Like the stand is probably one of the biggest things, apparently, based on some of the comments that we're getting.
I wonder that it looks cool, but like, it also seems like the sort of thing where, I don't know, I deal with a lot of monitors and review them, and one of the things we look for is, does it wobble when you type on the keyboard? And I have a feeling that, like, when you start clacking away on your keyboard or you rest your arms on that thing, I don't know how sturdy it's going to be.
It was a 13-pound base, I think, is what they said. The
13
unit.
pounds?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
I
keeps
mean,
it
I
in
guess it would have
place.
to be pretty massive.
And it didn't look like it was moving it when they were using it during the demonstration at all.
No.
Like when he was just moving it up and down, it wasn't
stayed in place.
wobbling. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at 13 pounds, I guess that probably would be strong enough. Although I could still find a way to knock it over. I'm sure is what would happen with me. I will never have something this fancy, but
Someone will.
Someone will. Yeah, somebody will. So there we go. Just kind of talking about that, going through the Microsoft event. So there's a lot to get to here. Like we say, go and put your comments and questions there into the chat if you're watching live right now. So going from the Surface Studio with the Surface Dial, let's talk about the overall idea of what they're going for with the Windows 10 Creators Update and the whole 3D concept that they were going for. One, I didn't know people still used Paint, which they were really pushing that.
It's very beloved, supposedly.
It's everyone's favorite application for taking a screenshot and saving that screenshot until you realize that if you hold Windows and then press print screen, it saves as a file into your pictures folder.
Really?
Yep.
Oh.
Today
Okay,
I learned.
so there we
much
go.
easier, yeah.
Then that's what Paint
And now
is
you'll
for.
never use Paint again, so you're welcome.
Well, I mean, the concept though of where they're going, I think, is something that's definitely innovative, can lead to I mean, we're going to talk about where they're going with all of this, at least kind of in the concept. And I think it's good for Microsoft to make this stand. It's something that I feel like we're used to seeing from Apple, you know, and that they're leading the charge and saying, no, this is going to be the future of where we're going. Microsoft's taking it and running with it and really incorporating this 3D aspect into a lot of different products and making it more accessible to people at home. And it is kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, I didn't realize I actually do like that. I do like these ideas that you're coming up with. What are your thoughts on 3D, like just in programming and just in the software that they're going to be using for this?
I thought that part was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Paint 3D. That's pretty sweet. I like it because I think it'll kind of, and they kind of implied this in the commercial, I think, or in the keynote, that it'll be there for kind of everyone to use. It'll kind of be an entry point for people to kind of getting into 3D, because everyone's talking about 3D printers, 3D whatnot.
Right.
And I think it's a cool kind of way for the general public to get their hands on real 3D computing.
Yeah, and actually get to see it and use it and understand the concepts and what you can use
Totally.
it for. Brandon, what do you think about it?
I feel as though there's no real practical application yet.
Yeah.
I feel it's kind of cool and it's forward thinking, but until the HoloLens is really accessible to the general public, it's still just a niche thing. It's kind of cool, but who's actually going to use it? I mean, you watched her create the demonstrator create a 3D image using Paint 3D, but I mean, is anyone really going to take the time to do that? Right
Yeah,
now?
is that going to be useful?
Yeah.
No.
Well,
no.
part of
Okay.
it, part of the reason that they also, and again, like, not to jump too far ahead here, but the reason that they wanted to push out these less expensive VR headsets is to try and encourage this in a consumer space. That right now, virtual reality is very much associated with, gaming, and that's what it's for. Is like you can play games, and that's cool, and you have to have a really crazy computer. But if you're not trying to play games, you're just trying to do some random desktop stuff and maybe throw, weird diorama things on your kitchen table. You don't need nearly that sort of serious computing power, and a lot of people will be able to just flip a switch and pay $200 or $300 and grab one of these headsets and start playing VR, and then those things start making more sense. These things like investing in Minecraft for HoloLens and 3D, 3D dioramas that you can oh, look at this fun time we had. I took all these pictures and made a little diorama, and we can all stand around.
Emojis
and talk
with a
about it.
beard.
Emojis with a beard,
Everybody needs the emoji with a beard. Well, that actually, we're going to get into the HoloLens and kind of the VR and where they're going with that. But let's talk about the gaming, because I know you just had an article that came out just about where Windows is going, especially compared to Apple and what they're doing or not doing. So what are your thoughts on Windows gaming?
Well, the thing about Windows gaming is that it's something that Mac just doesn't have anymore. That this is an area where they've totally been able to push Mac out of the space. And it's always sort of been the joke, right? That like, oh, what's your favorite Apple game? Oh, Photoshop, it's great. But it's not, it's really become serious. Like,
That's a hard
Brad's
game.
stand-up
that
hour.
was an old joke right there. But it's something that, we talk about like Overwatch. Blizzard didn't put out Overwatch for Mac, and people were like, oh, why didn't you always support Mac? It's like, well, nobody has the OpenGL support. Like, these systems don't have the graphical power they need. And it's a place where they've just totally run away with the market, and they're trying to bring people into their Xbox ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, especially for people who play on PC but don't own an Xbox, how effective that's going to be. Because I can tell you, like, people who play on PC have Steam. It's a really great service with great community support. It has streaming, it has voice chat, it has friends lists, and to go out of your way, unless you're playing, Forza or you're playing Gears of War or something on your PC, you're probably not going to be reaching for that Xbox app. And they're trying to get people to do that by offering things like streaming, which they stream to Beam, which I had not heard of.
I've never
I
heard
had
of
not
that.
heard of
And this
that.
is sort of the
First time
other
I've heard
catch
of
here,
that.
right? Is that like everybody streams to Twitch and
Yeah,
sometimes YouTube.
Is this just a Twitch competitor?
It's a
Is that
Twitch
what's-
competitor,
okay, that's what I
basically.
heard.
The neat part, I think, is the tournaments. That you can set up tournaments for these Xbox games with your friends or with the public. that you
Within
can
Beam,
say-
right?
Right. Well, it's not within Beam. I think it's like a separate part of the Xbox app. But it's, you can say like, oh, we're going to play Forza, and like, I want to see if I can, beat all my friends in Forza, and like, we'll set up a tournament 8 p.m. tonight.
Even that, I feel, appeals to the more hardcore gamers, though, because you still have to have people around and online, and you have to be more than just the casual person who picks up the controller for an hour in the evening.
But I think they're trying to draw that in by letting you say like, oh, I'm going to set 8 p.m. on Thursday night. We're all going to jump on at the same time, and maybe you don't play Forza that much, but like you jump on for an hour and a half and like play your friends in a little tournament and get some bragging rights out of it or not.
Back to the LAN party days.
Yeah.
Is that
Back to
where
the
we're
LAN
going?
party days.
Okay. Well, so that entire article is actually at digitaltrends.com right now, so you can go there and check that out. Well, let's move on and talk about the HoloLens and VR and some of the demonstrations they gave. The demonstration was a little bit hokey. Clearly, it was not live as it was happening if you watched it. But the ideas were pretty cool of incorporating this whole 3D concept that they had. And they did a demonstration with some HoloLens of this guy basically looking at a stool on a website, and he wanted to see how that would look in his living room, and he was able to reach out with the HoloLens, grab it off of the page, and place it, digitally into his living room and take a look at it. That kind of idea is pretty amazing. I mean, this is something that we've been hoping for with the HoloLens and wanting to see more of it as Microsoft has been slowly rolling out these cool videos, although getting actual hands-on with it is not something that I think Jeremy maybe did.
Yeah.
And Matt did briefly.
And Matt
as
did
well.
too. Yeah, so not very many people, though, have been able to actually see this in action. This kind of thing is something that could be completely revolutionary, and there's nobody else really that's going for this augmented reality at the level that Microsoft is. I can tell you this, like the HoloLens made me really excited. I would love to get my hands on a HoloLens and use that. I would be the guy wearing the Google Glass guy for HoloLens, absolutely. But what are your thoughts on the HoloLens? Like, what do you think about this display? Do you think this is actually practical that we'll see this, or is this just more? It's a really cool video you made, but we're never going to actually get our hands on it.
I think Microsoft is ahead of the curve in that regard. And I think it's a good thing because someone has to be ahead of the curve in order to push that onto the public and to push developers and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think augmented reality is so much more appealing to me personally than virtual reality because the
agree.
practical application, like you can bring things into your actual living space in front of you. I mean, when you look at medicine and operations, I think HoloLens showed a lot of stuff they could do with medical students and looking at things and making these holographic builds of the human body. And it's really intriguing. It's one thing to see just a virtual space, but to see things brought into your own is an entirely different story. And I think it's way more practical than virtual reality.
What are your thoughts on it?
I like it. I thought it was pretty cool. I've tried some of the VR stuff. Like I've tried the Vive before. That was really cool, very immersive. But like Brandon was saying, I like the practicality of like being able to interact with the real world, quote unquote.
The mixed reality, I think, is what they're trying to coin it as.
And I kind of like that because I think that for practicality, functionality purposes, that's the way to go. Obviously, like pulling out the chair, showing it like
Yeah.
here's the chair, like, before you purchase. That's pretty cool.
That makes sense.
That's pretty cool. Like, that's
It's a practical use of
that's
that
like
technology.
what you would see out of Star Trek almost, and it's sweet. It's like that's the future.
We're getting that much closer to the holodeck that I want. This is good for me.
Totally. But is it worth like spending money for a huge lens? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's part of the reason the price was so high initially is that if you were an approved developer and you got to pick one of these things up at $3,000 and it has to hook up to, again, a really high-end computer, you would have gotten this thing and opened it up, and there would have been like 2 things that you could have tried out immediately. Like anything else you wanted to do, you had to make for yourself. And it has to start there. It has to start with, big developers jumping on and making those big apps so that, when these headsets, these $300 headsets roll out, I have a feeling a lot of them, for $400 or $500 will be the Windows holographic certified as the Vive is. They already have said that the Vive has a 720p webcam, and it doesn't have the best field of view, but it works. They've said that this is a Windows holographic device that you can put that thing on and look around once it launches later next year.
So they're gearing up to really start spreading this around.
Yeah, but they have to put out something that people can use the first time.
Yeah.
So that there's interest, so that other hardware makers will jump in.
Well, and I think a big part of it is most people probably still don't even understand what a HoloLens is or augmented reality, let alone virtual reality. I mean, it's still getting out there. Virtual reality, I think this year now with the PlayStation coming out with it, and which is going to get it into the hands of a lot more people, more accessible than, the Vive is cool, but that's really expensive. Like, you got to really be into it to get that. I think this is maybe kind of that step with augmented reality. Just a lot of flashy videos, get used to this idea, and then slowly roll it out as it becomes more accessible. They do have their own VR headset that's going to be coming out too, which is kind of interesting. I think it was $300.
They said hardware partners, so
Hardware
like
partner.
HP, Lenovo. I don't want to misquote anyone there saying
Right.
they are, but there's a handful of computer manufacturers have basically signed on to bring these headsets. And that's a little more, like I said, it's a little less clear why, because there are virtual reality things. They showed like a Holo Tour or whatever, but I think when all they have to do really is put, a webcam on the front of those, and they become Windows holographic ready, and that's going to be the more relevant tech, I think, for desktop computing, like you were saying. That's a useful thing that you can have, and that VR is always going to be kind of this immersive environments, video spheres, gaming, that kind of thing.
Or, kind of crossing them together. I mean, I'd need to watch exactly what they were doing again, but I think they're trying to get to that point where the AR and the VR flow, together, and you can kind of go back and forth with it. It'll be interesting to see where they go with it, but I definitely think overall Microsoft showed some initiative in where they're going for the future, even though it's still a little bit hard to grasp everything. And again, still don't understand Paint is still in there, but it's, they are showing initiative. Like, they're not sitting back and doing old Microsoft stuff and just slowly rolling out their stuff every year. They're really making a push forward to be the leader in this field. And I think they've got the advantage over Apple when it comes down to it.
The Touchbar is going to work with Microsoft Word, though.
The Touchbar will?
in Mac OS.
Well, they're working together in tandem.
They always have.
Well, there we
Well.
go. All right. Any final thoughts on Microsoft, Apple? Anything else you wanted to get out there?
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying any of it.
None of it?
No.
You're not down with any of
It's
it?
just all too expensive, I think. I think it's on the cusp of, it's getting there. And like you said with VR, we will get there, but not now.
Yeah. Brad?
I agree. I think once those, especially price is a big barrier, and once those things become the price we're used to paying, when you can pay $200 and get a VR headset that's going to do those things, those tours and the videos, and little light
be able
gaming.
to go to Rome like they showed in there.
Yeah, exactly. Then that stuff, when you're looking at $250 for a monitor or $250 for something that is analogous to that, that's when these things are going to really start becoming more important.
Well, maybe the more we see it roll out, I'm going to guess by this time next year, the price is going to be dramatically cheaper for getting into virtual reality. And I think, again, I still think it's going to be the PlayStation that's going to help drive that price down, just because everybody's going to be getting a PS4 or already has one, and it's so easy to jump right into it.
And we reviewed it favorably. I think everyone who's had hands-on with it here or at our spot in New York said it's...
I disagree.
Okay, well...
I had hands-on time with it, and I did not care for it. Mostly for me, it was an issue of that we've spent the last year coming up with standards for VR gaming, and it seems like the games that I played for PSVR didn't really follow that. There were a lot of games where it was like, oh, it's a first-person game, and you use the joystick to move and spin, and it was like, this is making me really sick right now, and they were like, VR, huh? Guys, right? And it's like, you guys had like an opportunity here to look elsewhere and see what was working.
Brad's milky beer just makes him a pessimist. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. So this is Trends with Benefits. We do this once a week, this podcast live right here on YouTube, and then available as a podcast wherever you get your audio podcasts. So go ahead and check those out. We've got lots of back episodes. We've got all kinds of different content here at Digital Trends. So definitely check all that out. You can always send us an email, podcast@digitaltrends.com afterward, or leave a comment, and we'll get to those. We definitely want to hear more comments on your thoughts on both Microsoft and Apple. I'm sure somebody out there disagrees with what we said, so let us know what that is, or if you agree. However it is, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back next week with another episode.